Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy, Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me, and I'm back. And I am back with part 3 of What If Deku had a telekinesis quirk. And if you enjoy, make sure to show some love. Leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. As always, I appreciate the support. Y'all give stupid amounts of support to me, this channel, and just this entire YouTube journey in a whole. So, as always, I always appreciate that, and I always appreciate all the love and support that you give me. And yeah, I'm not gonna waste that much more time, and we're gonna get right into part 3 of What If Deku had a telekinesis quirk. Let's get it. Izuku is currently out cold, and relatively out cold for a good bit. He utilized his quirk out of pure anger. In doing this, it kind of messed with his body, but through a ton of x-rays and checking out what's going on, actually it turns out Izuku's body has kind of transformed quite a bit. It's kind of odd. Through extensive research with Recovery Girl, she's found that his body, through anger itself, has kind of stressed and then healed itself back together. But there's obviously less benefits than there are detriments, because if we look closely, it seems like his muscles are shredded. It seems that his body is basically broken down. Just like if you had a really hard workout, that's exactly how his body is more or less reacting. His body is broken down entirely, as if he worked out his entire body all at the same time. But luckily, his telekinesis is able to kind of strain and hold itself back together, but for now, he's kind of in this comatose-like state. He's kind of just recovering. It'll take a couple days, one, 2, 3, maybe 4 days for him to fully recover out of it, but there's no telling how he'll even feel when he gets back up, when he's awake. So a couple days would pass, 1, 2, 3 days, and Izuku would finally awaken, and everything around him would kind of be at a standstill in a way. Many people would be hoping for his recovery, many people would be worried about him in the long run, but Izuku would hopefully and eventually be fine. He would wake up to Recovery Girl explaining the situation about what's going on with him and how he's recovering, and it seems that his quirk and the utilization of it through the anger that he was feeling has definitely put a strain on his body. Izuku knows exactly that's the case. He knew a long time ago that his quirk, in terms of power, would accelerate tenfold if he used it through anger. He's never personally been able to control it properly, and he guesses that he's not able to necessarily control it properly even now. But Recovery Girl says quite the opposite, saying that yes, he did go into this, out cold state for a couple days, 3 to 4 days, but still, it seems that his body has definitely adapted to it, has recovered. It was as if it was an accelerated workout. Think about an Olympic trainer, someone that's basically like an Olympic racer, or someone that runs really far, someone that's going to participate in tons of races, will work out for months on end, years in fact. It's as if Izuku went through all of that training in a single moment. His whole body broke down and then more or less healed itself back up through his telekinesis, holding his body together and eventually leading to this. Recovery Girl would show more or less an x-ray and some more detailed holograms of exactly how Izuku's body was healing, and right now it's not fully healed just yet. Think of himself as if he's in a cocoon-like state. He's in stasis. So there's really nothing he can do until he's fully ready to go. Izuku questions what he's supposed to do now. I mean, he's gonna have training at UA and stuff like that. What's he supposed to do? And Recovery Girl shakes her head, saying that there's clearance that would allow him to more or less skip out on all that. He'll be missing the UA Sports Festival and a couple other mild training sessions that they'll be doing throughout the next couple days, but it's better for him to do this and start his recovery. there's a reason why UA is the best high school in Japan. It's not only because of their intense training and proper etiquette, it's because, well, they're going to get him all prepared, suited back up in a matter of days. Recovery Girl gives him an entire workout regimen, entire recovery regimen, so that he can be prepared to be, well, up in training once again. So when everybody is participating in the UA Sports Festival, having fun and showing what they can do, and eventually leading to Bakugo winning it all, Izuku is in recovery mode. He's doing minor workouts, he's icing, using the sauna, using ice baths, anything you can think about. His body itself may have done part of the job for him initially, but his quirk isn't gonna do everything for him. At the end of the day, he needs to put in the work himself as well, in which he's doing right now. Izuku continues to work out, and just heal himself back up to the largest extent possible. Izuku can feel that his body is a lot stronger. He begins to do push-ups, and it feels as if he's doing them with complete and utter ease. But Recovery Girl reminds him that using his quirk in complete anger, especially without knowing how to properly utilize it and properly control it, will bring massive detriment to his body. The only reason why he's able to more or less be stable now is because more or less luck. Luckily, he didn't actually utilize his quirk to a super insane amount of extent. Let's say he utilized that quirk for hours. Maybe he utilizes it for days. That would strain his body immensely, especially if his body's not ready for it. But through x-rays and also a lot of testing through blood work and stuff, it seems that his body is in Olympic level shape, which is an insane thing for a kid his age, insane thing for anybody in the world. Olympic level shape, and it seems that his body will continue to adapt to it and continue to strain itself and then recover to eventually lead more or less Izuku in the path of being like superhuman like. It's kind of insane. But Recovery Girl still recommends to try to use his quirk with joy. Use his quirk with the smile on his face. Try to stay calm. Don't let that anger take over again, because there is detriment to that. If he lets it take over and he obliterates his body and his telekinesis can't hold it together, can't hold his muscles together, he might just lay there useless. He might be more of a detriment on the battlefield than actually a help. Of course, Izuku's listening to this, hears her out entirely, and continues his recovery. Eventually it would lead to him back in the classroom, and obviously with the UA Sports Festival already done and over with, he would listen to Aizawa as they speak about more or less what they're going to be doing and the hero agencies that they're allowed to head over in terms of internships in the coming days. Izuku would hear all of this, but he wouldn't have any hero agencies to even go to. Who is he supposed to work with? What is he supposed to do? I mean, there's literally nothing for him to do. But he hears all this, and Aizawa would eventually pull him over after class, telling him that it's actually completely fine, that he'll have a spot, he'll have a place, and since he doesn't have any eyes on him at this moment, Aizawa says that he'll take him on. They're speaking with the support course now to more or less get a replica of Aizawa's scarf, and that Izuku will have a training partner as well. And he asks who this is, and it's actually somebody from the general studies, Hitoshi Shinso, someone that Aizawa has seen promise in. And Izuku, being that of the top student of UA or Class 1A, will definitely have benefits with showing Shinso what he can do and what he'll be looking forward to doing in terms of fighting off people as strong as Izuku. Days would pass, and that training would then begin. Izuku would begin learning how to utilize Aizawa's scarf, which would be an absolute breeze. He literally has telekinesis. But here's the thing. Aizawa wants him to utilize it even more freely than he utilizes it. Utilize the scarf and everything that he uses in battle as if it's its own entity. Telekinesis is the ability to move objects with one's mind. Izuku needs to separate his mind and its consciousness from one. If he can utilize the scarf without even thinking about the scarf, the scarf will more or less be another person to protect him, another person to help him out in battle. Izuku hears this, and it sounds very martial artist, like he actually is quite fond of this idea. In martial arts, you might use different weaponry, or in different types of martial arts, you might use different weaponry, and in a way, your body is a weapon at its core. So the idea of utilizing this said scarf, using his telekinesis, but at the same time trying to use it without really thinking, is something that interests Izuku heavily. So he continues his training, keeping that smile on his face, but at the same time trying to focus, trying to not think too hard, but at the same time let his body move without really him questioning himself in the long run. It would come not that easy to Izuku. He can utilize the scarf just normally. It's very easy when he's thinking about it. But we're talking about seeing a punch from behind without actually seeing that punch get even thrown, blocking that punch without even knowing it's coming. Izuku could theoretically be able to close his eyes and feel a punch come his way as the scarf would block it for him, or move him out of the way so he can dodge it relatively easily. After a good bit of training over the next couple days, Izuku would slowly but surely kind of get it down, but it would still have insane restrictions, and Aizawa wouldn't expect him to learn and master this in only a couple days. I mean, that's just very ambitious. But then a phone call would eventually ring in that would kind of shut down everything that they're working on, and kind of shut down everything that is getting put forward at this moment. That phone call would tell Aizawa that Tenya Ida has been killed by the hero killer. Now this would be shattering for not only Izuku, someone who's actually been pretty fond of Tenya Ida, being that they are kind of friends. I mean, they're not like best of friends or anything like that, but they are friends to an extent, and it would be just jarring in all transparency. It would be terrifying. The idea that someone as young as Tenya, someone that is just like Izuku, someone working hard to expand his knowledge, and on top of that, get ready to be a hero, is now passed away, is now dead because of a hero killer. Luckily, they were able to capture him. With the heroes that were on site in Hosu City, they were able to catch the hero killer, but there were some other casualties as well by other pro heroes. Other pro heroes have fallen to the hero killer, and luckily, well, they'll be the last. Luckily enough, there's no more casualties after the fact, because the hero killer is now under, well, surveillance, and now under custody, or in custody of, well, the heroes. With that said, though, it would bring all of the hero or the future heroes, or Class 1A, back to UA. The fact that this occurred definitely cut internships relatively short. This is disappointing for most of them, but at the same time, it needed to be done. Of course, there is a massive incident that needs to be told to the students, the one we just spoke about, and Izuku is not too happy over the fact that this even occurred. It actually hits him pretty hard. Nonetheless, though, Aizawa makes it clear that even though this occurred, they all have a future standpoint in mind. They need to push ahead and hopefully get stronger. That's the goal. That's all of their goals. So Izuku would listen to Aizawa, especially after the mentorship that he has given him, and he would continue studying, hitting the books, and getting ready for their final exam. Because the final exam will include not only a written portion, but also a practical, something that Izuku could suspect is not going to be as easy as just destroying some robots, in which when he talks to his class, he makes that abundantly clear that they shouldn't think that this is going to be some easy breezy test. It's never that simple. If they know Aizawa as well as, well, they really should, they should know that as well. Everybody realizes that is definitely the truth. And after the written exam, when they're brought to the gym, standing in front of a huge amount of teachers and pro heroes, they realize this to be the truth. Aizawa makes it clear that, well, they're going to be fighting the teachers today, and that is going to be their practical exam. This would slightly excite Izuku. I mean, We're talking about sparring or fighting with pro heroes that are of extreme power and experience. This is something Izuku has been waiting for a long time. And actually, they'd be paired up in duos. Izuku is relatively excited about this and eventually would learn that he'd be paired up with Momo Yaoyorozu to actually go up against Shota Aizawa. Now, this is something he's excited about. He knows that he won't be able to utilize his quirk most likely throughout this time, but that does not scare him. He throws on his scarf and he looks at Aizawa as he's presenting this, and Aizawa can tell that the kid is determined. He looks toward Momo as they more or less are relatively confident about this stance, about what they're going to do. So in the little time they have, they begin planning and just strategizing what they should do. And Izuku basically says that a hand-to-hand combat fights will actually benefit them more than she can possibly imagine. He's been in martial arts for a long time, and yes, Aizawa might have the leg up, but if they're fighting in terms of hand-to-hand combats, Aizawa will have his eyes on Izuku, and if he leaves his sight at all, the fight is over instantly. He tells Momo that his eyes will always be on Izuku or on himself, because if he doesn't, he knows the fight will drastically swing in their favor. So she'll have to basically utilize those openings to more or less catch Aizawa off guard, to either get him to diverge his eyes away from Izuku, or capitalize on the fact that Aizawa will not be prepared for whatever's to come. And Momo thinks this is a great idea, and Momo even comes up with some other things herself in terms of how to do it, and Izuku nods and says that he trusts her, that just to do whatever her mind says to do, that they will come out on top if she does just that, giving Momo the confidence to definitely make that step forward. So let's just say this 2 versus 1 against Aizawa is a lot less fair than you possibly imagine. When they walk into the city, they know that Aizawa is going to be cutting off more or less the city to narrow down where they could be. Izuku would eventually see Aizawa and would try to keep eyes and tabs on him as much as possible, eventually getting toward the gate, and Aizawa would stop them right in their tracks. Aizawa would attack Izuku and try to string him up. But luckily, with his training and utilization of the scarf, he's actually able to control the scarf as well, even without his telekinesis. This surprises Aizawa, but Aizawa shouldn't be too surprised at the fact that Izuku is one heck of not only a listener, but one heck of a student. So he shouldn't be too shocked at this revelation, but when the hand-to-hand combat begins, it seems like Izuku is kind of on par with Aizawa. Yes, Aizawa may know a lot of techniques, may know weaknesses, and also has the advantage in terms of height and length, but Izuku has years of martial arts training now. He's been training in martial arts for a while, and when it comes to grappling and getting close, this is where Izuku wants to be, because if his eyes can't touch Izuku, the fight will be over in a matter of seconds. So it's more of a pulling of guard in terms of Aizawa, trying to keep his eyes on Izuku, but in that split second, he may have forgotten that Momo is still in this fight. Capture-like tape that is more or less like metal would begin to surround both Izuku and Aizawa, and Izuku would kind of smile at this regard when his eyes would get covered by the first bit of that capture tape. Izuku would immediately be able to separate the capture tape away from his own body, getting away as the rest of the capture tape wraps around Aizawa himself. Izuku would hold Aizawa still and levitate him as Momo and him walk out of the gate, carrying Aizawa mid-air. Now this would impress everybody. The game plan, the strategy, and on top of that, the coordination that they really had, it was kind of flawless. Yes, they aren't facing any All Might, but Aizawa is the farthest thing from a slouch. The farthest thing. Yes, Izuku definitely was probably outbeaten in terms of just raw fighting ability by Aizawa, but since Izuku is really strong, like I said earlier, Olympic level, he was able to grapple Aizawa, forcing him to lose his focus just for that split second. And that is all he needed, and that is all she wrote. Just like that, the fight was over, and Momo and Izuku would pass the exam. And Aizawa would be impressed, very impressed, saying that he's definitely been taught well and he listens very great, because nobody else would have been able to do such a thing as he did. In terms of the other fights, All Might would be fighting in this as well, seeing that Bakugo and Todoroki would take on All Might. Izuku would be kind of sad. He wanted to take on All Might. That would have been fun. He doesn't think a fight between himself, Momo, versus All Might would have been that fair in terms of the grand scheme of things, because he doesn't know how strong his telekinesis really is. But maybe, just maybe, he's underrating himself. Maybe he could have took on All Might. Maybe his telekinesis would have been the pure weakness All Might hasn't faced ever. Maybe. Well, he'll never really find out as he watches Todoroki and Bakugo struggle to fight All Might to a really high extent. He watches, and eventually it would lead to them losing, but since they fought All Might, it wouldn't actually be that bad against them. Aizawa would force them to go into extra classes when they go to the forest training camp, but maybe this would be good for them. Maybe it'd be better for them to get that extra training in because of how high of a level they already set themselves at. But still, they really did do pretty well against All Might, all considering the circumstances, but with that said, they still lost, and they still failed, quote-unquote, the exam. And all that would be wrapped up. The exams would be done, and the forest training camp would be in the lens of Izuku and the rest of the class. The next day, they would hop on a bus and go straight over there. They would begin to arrive, and the Wild Pussycats would be waiting for them at a nearby cliff edge, and they would all begin speaking. Izuku, still being the nerd he is, would be impressed that the Wild Pussycats are even there, and would say that he is a pretty big fan, that they have been around for a while, in which one of them would get kind of mad, saying that he's calling them old. Izuku would shake his head and say that's not exactly what he's saying, but take it as you wish. It's a kind of a funny moment for them, but eventually they would get the last laugh when a wave of this mountain, it seems, as if they're in the water, swings them off the mountain. Luckily, Izuku is able to kind of levitate, and he considers staying up, but he decides to just fly down with his classmates and to soften the blow of the ground hitting them, obviously, on all his classmates by more or less making them levitate a second before they hit the ground, and it would allow them to soften the landing on the way down. They all thank him, at least some of them. Some of them say that they don't really need Izuku's help, more like Bakugo. Bakugo kind of saying he doesn't need the help of Izuku, he literally can fly, and Izuku kind of just ignores him. And this fight with all these monsters within this forest would be relatively easily defeated. Izuku's telekinesis quirk would allow them to absolutely obliterate all of them, and it would be relatively easy in the long run. So when they make it to the forest training camp, it would actually be a lot sooner than normal. It still would take some time, don't get me wrong, to actually finish everything up, but still, he was able to kind of blast through the monstrous creatures that were made of the earth relatively quickly. With all that done though, Izuku would be excited for the next day, excited to start training, and Aizawa would just continue to have Izuku work on the training he's already been doing, and he just does that on repeat over and over again, and it would be one heck of progress. Izuku would see insane progress over the next couple weeks, and no villains would even show up, especially because Bakugo would not be all mad and scrappy about his whole #1 victory. I mean, Izuku may have not been there, but there was a reason for that, so he wouldn't be really mad about that, and he could always get his rematch with Izuku here at the forest training camp, which that's exactly what they do. We can argue that Bakugo may be strong, but Izuku is on a whole nother level, and he's able to display that to Bakugo relatively easily. Bakugo, this makes Bakugo kind of want to get stronger even more now. That's all he wants to do. push himself, and push himself. So that's what he's going to start doing. He's going to push himself to the limit so he can be the most powerful in not only UA, but the entirety of Japan. No, the entirety of the world. That's what he's going to do. Everybody had a great time at the Forest Training Camp, and the progress they have seen far exceeds anything you can possibly imagine. Of course, a villain invasion a couple of days into the Forest Training Camp would have stumped them initially, but now that they had the full length of it, was definitely beneficial. But on the drive back, something would be happening. Something extremely uneasy would drop in the stomach of everybody around. When they would pull into one of the cities, it seems like, well, chaos is a virtue. Chaos is everywhere. They don't even know what's happening, what is going on. They look around and eventually their bus would crash into something and flip. And as it flips, Izuku would look around, everything kind of slowing down for him. He would catch the bus himself, straightening it out and putting it down on the ground. Aizawa asks if everyone's okay and if Izuku's feeling alright after that. Izuku nods and says he's fine. The training really has paid off. Izuku would go toward the door, and as he does, it seems like someone from behind kicks him. But that's odd. Why would someone from behind kick him? He looks to see that someone blasted through a window. A girl, in fact. A girl that is obsessed with knives, that has a crazed look on her face, kicks Izuku out the door. And Izuku immediately puts his hand up, ready to basically have a conflict with her. And this girl's name is Himiko Toga. He immediately freezes Toga in place, but right after that gets launched, as he didn't expect another person to follow up. As he gets launched, he looks around and he's surrounded by the League of Villains. He looks over toward the bus, and it seems like they all have their hands full as well. He looks around, and eventually he would get this eerie, cold feeling of a person walking behind him. Izuku would look to his right, seeing a Nomu, and then look to his left, seeing Shigaraki and one arm missing, or one hand missing. As he sees this though, he looks away and he sees someone that is far scarier. Someone that makes his lungs and jaw and his heart drop to his stomach. All for one, standing right behind him. Izuku immediately would back up, as if his body itself is telling him to run. Izuku doesn't even know what to do, his hands shaking as if fear itself is affecting his quirk as well. Rocks begin to more or less hover around him, and he's shocked to see this, as if it's a fear-like mechanism. What's even going on? He's never felt this before. He's never been this terrified. Izuku can see buildings itself shaking as if they're drawing toward Izuku, and Izuku doesn't even know what's happening. Izuku would immediately send more or less a ton of rocks and cement towards Shigaraki, knowing that Shigaraki can probably control the Nomu, and that All for One, well, he might be able to too, but there is no quickly taking him out. He pins Shigaraki within a building and forces the rocks and the cement to surround him entirely. All for One would immediately send these black tendrils toward Izuku, and it feels as if the tendrils are moving at insane speeds. There is no dodging them. The tendrils are about to hit Izuku, and just as they're about to hit him, well, a big kick to his side would send him moving out of the way. He would look to see that it's All Might. All Might apologizes that he had to kick the young fellow. He apologizes, saying, "Young Midoriya, you might want to leave now." Izuku looks toward Nomu and looks toward All for One as he flies off, getting at least a decent bit away, as he watches as All Might clashes with All for One. This fight is one for the ages. This fight is one for the history books. The very last fight. The very last draw beneath this, or the draw in the line in the sand. It's finally time to end everything. Izuku watches as All Might seems to be losing the fight, but Izuku looks toward his classmates as everything seems to be cleared up, and he feels that he can't just sit there and watch All Might lose. he'll make sure that he wins. He flies forward as All For One is basically berating All Might as he looks up to see that Izuku out of nowhere punches him square in the face. Using his telekinesis, he was able to pick up not only speed but power in his fist, landing a blow so hard it shatters his face mask. All Might would immediately follow up, punching All For One to the ground, and Izuku would scream to All Might to use whatever power he has left to end the fight now. Izuku would hold All For One completely still as he uses his telekinesis to even give All Might more velocity and speed heading toward All For One. And one last blow, All For One would be out cold, entirely out cold, and on the contrary would be barely hanging on to life. At the end of the day, they did what must be done, and luckily enough, Shigaraki actually was captured as well, being completely impaled beneath rubble. They weren't able to find him. Kurogiri was unable to locate Shigaraki in this moment, and they were able to more or less secure not only All For One, but Shigaraki himself. But what is next? What is next to come for not only Izuku, but the rest of his class? Well, you'll have to find out in the next part of What If Deku Had a Telekinesis Quirk. And if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, a sub, and a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.